I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Nicole Crawford, and I'm the director and chief curator at the University of Wyoming Art Museum. I'm coming to you from the US. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. I have the honor of chairing this session 7, New Perspective and New Roles 2. Since I am coming from the University of Wyoming, it's important that we collectively acknowledge that the University of Wyoming occupies the ancestral and traditional lands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, and Shoshone indigenous peoples, along with other native tribes who call the Great Basin and the Rocky Mountain region home. We recognize, support, and advocate alongside indigenous individuals and communities who live here now and with those forcibly removed from their homelands. So we always start acknowledging where we are in Wyoming. So I am so happy for this session. I've been reading everybody's abstracts, and I think we're going to have great conversations. So I think everybody will present. I'll stick to time for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a great conversation afterwards, because I think everybody's kind of relates to each other. So we are going to go ahead and start with, I'm sorry, I'm going to say everybody's name incorrectly too. Florian Knothe from the University Museum and Art Gallery at the University of Hong Kong. And please correct how I pronounced your name. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, that's perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's perfect, thank you.
Okay, perfect. I want to thank you, Nicole and Marta and everybody for having me. I'm excited to speak about some of the new perspectives that changed our lives in the past 18 and more months now, and speak about some new ways of thinking about the physical and the digital presentation to the public and the media involved in different ways. When I was just looking through previous presentations, I realized that in autumn 2015, I gave a presentation on the art of collaboration and the partnerships we built in collaborative projects we executed in and with the community. This collaborative aspect remains hugely important to me also personally today. But we here in my small museum certainly need to shift that online. 6 years ago, we exclusively focused on physical exhibitions and outreach activities inside the museum. And I have a few pictures here, larger crowds. We can't do groups that size at the moment. So I look at this with romantic memories. Our museum always had a website, of course, as there's so many others, but for us it was really only there to inform visitors about the collection exhibitions, to prepare them for a physical visit. That's another event. That's one view of our old website. Today, I want to focus on the differences and the multi-layered approaches to visiting permanent collections and special exhibition galleries at the University Museum and Art Gallery at Hong Kong U, where I work. During the pandemic, we developed guided visits to our galleries that are designed for small numbers of participants to offer a focused educational experience and comply with the government and university guidelines. What I mean by that is that we had a period where we could only do groups of 6. Now we can do groups of 12. And we just do more and more tailor-made tours to basically benefit from this very intimate experience that we can offer our visitors. This concept offers important constituents from the community, mostly students, of course, limited, but nonetheless hugely important access. Physical museum visits and the study of original objects in person cannot be replaced by digital experiences. They are unique. During the pandemic and beyond, it's our goal to continue to offer physical access to the museum, its collections and exhibitions, to teach about art materials and techniques, to recognize these, and the possible aging processes, and to instruct in object handling, conservation, and so on. Participants and those with us are students of credit-bearing courses and the general public benefit from studying original works of art in person. This experience is, in my opinion, irreplaceable. At the same time, I should say, digital or online experiences are also unique and increasingly irreplaceable. I show you here the exhibition page for the African exhibition that we just deinstalled and sent back. And this is a view into the handout to the exhibition that we used to put online already for a while to prepare visitors for their visit. Digital experiences do not need do not replace the intimate physical visits, and they shouldn't, but they must build upon the strength of their own medium to engage online visitors, individuals and classes that may or may not ever come to the physical museum. Larger numbers of stakeholders are given online access to digital exhibitions and video recordings of introductions to special exhibition topics and interviews. This is a list of videos we've done just in recent months, as well as to art making. And this is an exhibition page, just giving direct access. It doesn't work here right now, but direct access to the videos. The latter idea is accompanied by worksheets for children and art enthusiasts to stimulate interested parties to make their own art and thereby engage with museum objects, their iconography and patterns at home. So besides the art that we speak about in videos, we also started putting these kind of worksheets online for people to see these as part of our Museum from Home. Our Museum from Home access connects multiple levels for recipients of our social media posts and visitors to our website, and we try to interconnect all these different media to explore different exhibition projects as well as different aspects of the same display that remain highly important now that UMAC, our museum, reopened again to the public. Our digital projects are more text-heavy and illustrated, but they are not virtually tours of the museum, so we don't attempt to walk you through the gallery through the physical space. These exhibitions are more a mixture between a book or an essay, and I show you one of the pages here, and a museum exhibition that does away with the atmosphere and volume of a physical space and rethinks groupings and juxtapositions of objects and themes so that they make sense, are informative to internet users. They also connect to videos, worksheets, and handouts continuously and offer much more than a physical visit, or offer similar information in a very different format. Our digital projects are influenced by the digital humanities, if you like, rather than by physical exhibitions. The great advantage we see in separating the digital from the physical is that, for example, documents, like in our Eileen Zhang exhibition, the one I have up here, that is not so appealing visually, can play an important role as they underline the narrative that is based on archival research rather than an in-gallery experience. In other words, when we did open this exhibition to the public, the visual impact, and we knew this, of course, curating the exhibition, the visual impact was not as bountiful and interesting as when we curate exhibitions with objects. So we thought actually in hindsight that the online exhibition in this case worked a lot better than the traditional gallery-based exhibition. This digital exhibition we did on the renowned Chinese scholar and writer was our fourth digitally born exhibition, in that it appeared online before the galleries reopened from the pandemic-related closure. And it arguably worked much better online, and it received many more visitors. Due to the pandemic, our visitor numbers are still quite low. And with this exhibition, we had more than 10,000 visitors in the first 48 hours, which had a little bit to do with the social media campaign and informing colleagues and other followers around the world. The only special fact about the gallery display was, and I should say this maybe, that the truth is that Eileen Zhang, so this important Chinese scholar, she studied at our museum building when it was still the university's Chinese book library during her studies in Hong Kong in the 1940s. So when we returned to the gallery, we played that up. We were basically in exactly the same space where she had studied 70 years or 80 years before. Our digital efforts are all developed in-house, which many people and the university in some ways sees as an advantage, and it saves cost. But in my mind, we've come to a point where we need to collaborate a lot more. And this really brings me to another, maybe the most important advantage that I would like to stress here in our UMAC community. And that is the opportunity to work collaboratively online. We do not need to fly objects around the world to curate exhibitions that bring together virtually objects from our many museums, discuss the scholarly subjects in focus, and draw attention to the art collections, archives, and scholarly work done in our active and learned community. During the last days, we just received and unpacked a Chinese art collection from Germany. So on that note, you could say this is maybe the most ridiculous thing to do in a pandemic, to fly Chinese art from Europe back to China for a physical exhibition. On that note, I really wish for all of us to come together and develop more UMAC projects, connecting us closer with a goal to create impact in our global community. And I think we can all do that if we get together for digital projects. And I think also that this is very much part of the University Museums Without Walls and the discussion about, I think 2 hours ago, that I think in some ways my presentation wants to link to as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fantastic. So up next, Anna is able to connect with us, so that's great. So up next, we have Ana Avelar from the University of Brasília from Brazil, talking to us about the digital Niemeyer House, Gambiarra as a strategy to promote a connected university art museum. So if you want to share your PowerPoint.
Thank you, Nicole. Just one moment, please. I'll just put it in the first slide and then I can begin. Thank you very much. Can you all see my screen right now? Is that okay, Nicole?
Yep. Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to be as synthetic as I can. I would firstly like to thank Nicole for being one of the best organizers I could ever wish for, as we are all in such different spaces and always our connectivity is not the best we could wish for. Today, I am a professor at University of Brasília, and I also work as a curator in many projects inside the university and outside of the university. And I would like to present a case study. I was part of a project. I was the coordinator of a project called Digital Niemeyer House. This space, Niemeyer House, was a space which is now closed, dedicated to contemporary art, Brazilian contemporary art in the University of Brasília. And here I will defend that Gambiarra, which we could translate roughly as improvisation, could be used as a strategy to promote a connected university art museum for precarious spaces. This is the reality we had at Niemeyer House. Niemeyer House was projected by this important architect, which also, as you all know, thought the whole city, and it was abandoned for more than 20 years. It was the first house he actually lived in the city, and it was not even registered in his works, among his works on his website. So we could, in the cultural department of the university, occupy this house after these 20 years, and we thought that it should be a space for contemporary art. So we developed a project that was establishing a first collection of Brazilian contemporary works for Niemeyer House by donations. This had a curatorial point of view, so these weren't just donations, but specific donations that could reflect upon the political situation we were living in at that point, and which is much worse right now. So I read from my slides, so I will not make us even lose some time here. This recent collection was open for only 90 days because of the COVID pandemic, and the team that was responsible for the collection, myself and my students, we had to focus on restructuring the exhibition program in the digital sphere, following a new path established by museum spaces and cultural centers around the world, as our colleague was just presenting right now. We had no structure for this, no digital structure, and this situation imposed to us a continuous process of learning about the interactive possibilities developed in the field of social networks. So we had necessarily to use social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Wikipedia, YouTube, and even Tinder. And I will try to explain this a bit more. Niemeyer House's digital activities resonated among artists, curators, and art professors, as the Instagram profile created in March had reached 4,800 followers by August 2020. So what I'm bringing here to you now is a situation very different from the one we saw before, where the University Museum doesn't have a digital presence because it has a precarious structure in terms both of the team that maintains this collection, this museum, but also in terms of subsidies to structure a digital presence. So also we chose the social media's operating mode of communication because it contributed to improving the perception of our audiences, which we hadn't yet studied, helping our space to efficiently serve its role of making the collection available and accessible. The project we did won best online version of an institutional exhibition at a public poll promoted in Brazil from a famous Brazilian magazine dedicated to contemporary art in 2020. And right now I'm bringing here some theoretical references for this project. We thought that the social media space could be an interesting tool to use online, since we did not have this structured space. And we developed this project in a very urgent matter, facing the contingencies of social isolation. Our activities were planned and immediately implemented. We had the aim of bringing discussions about contemporary art, and we needed to do this from an academic perspective in order to orient our publics towards something that was actually deep, thoughtful, and reflected. Before the pandemic, Niemeyer House had only one Instagram profile, and it was associated with the Facebook, which served only to publicize in-person events. This is very common, and it was very common among Brazilian museums in 2019. We understood that it was necessary to research about relationships between museums and social networks at a time when virtual spaces became enormously demanded to meet the need for readjustment of work processes. Most Brazilian art museums had an incipient online presence until then, so we read much academic research, especially from Australia, that could orient us in this structure. A studying laboratory was created for the development of the construction of our digital presence, establishing an experimental space that matured according to the responses of our publics and the adhesion of artists to the proposals put forward. So it was very experimental. We were always talking to our publics back and forth to understand if our activities were being interesting enough, were having some kind of engagement. The concepts that actually oriented our project were mostly three that I can think about right now. The first one being the triangular approach, the famous triangular approach developed by Ana May Barbosa, our important art education thinker and former professor of the University of Brasília. She used to say that we could actually contextualize the work of art and analyze images while also creating art, and that this would actually help us to achieve visual literacy. So Ana May Barbosa's thought helped us think about the activities we could do online, and we would translate her work, which was of course thought to be presence work, was thought to be for working inside a museum, to a digital experience. We had to do this adaptation, but at the same time thinking that these are different modes of realities. Gambiarra was also something to think about. It's a concept very much used in Brazilian history of art, because it has to do with a solution to precariousness and is not opposed at the same time to perfection and permanence. So it is a concept that could help us to think how to maintain our work at the museum with contemporary art in the level of quality, while also at the same time not being able to actually be any more than we could, because our structure could not enable us in that way. We had to be flexible, adaptable, and experimental. And this helped us overcome the barriers of our digital inequality. So we improvised with the available tools, and we maintained a critical perspective. Theoretical horizon also was the idea of curatorial activism proposed by the curator Macquarie. We thought that her thoughts, her reflections could bring us a way to include many of the publics, the social groups that saw themselves as groups that were not being visualized by most Brazilian museums. So this inspired us to actually think again about this digital precariousness that we were facing, and how we could actually ask the public to be with us in constructing this kind of new museum. These are some of the works we did with artists during this project. We had a lot of research done, as I was saying, about digital presence of art museums online. And as you all know, there is a different concept of communication which rules social media. In this aspect, we could realize, we noticed that most Brazilian museums were not preparing their teams, and they did not have prepared teams to actually develop an interesting presence online. So we weren't alone in that way. We also noticed how co-creators of content as our publics could actually help us find our own voice. And we surely used the idea of a connected museum, thinking that we did, as my colleague just said, a lot of collaborative work, and that's a new way to actually overcome most of the specific situations we had to face in the digital reality. Some of the activities we experimented upon during this project, I brought to you here. The first one, and the most successful one, I may say, was our occupation, triangular occupation. We did this takeover with artists. They were absolutely free to do as they wished for 24 hours on our Instagram account. We were the first museum to do a takeover as open as this one, inspiring museums from all over the country. And over 8 months, 29 artists and artistic collectives populated our social media profile with such diverse content. Other digital activities we did while also maintaining this takeover series had some kind of pedagogical or didactic view to them. So the
We're
first
getting close
one
to time,
was,
so just want to let you know.
thank you. Okay, thank you. The first one was called What Is? The second, Art and My Work and Educational Triangular. These series, they were sometimes presented for children, but most of the time presented for all different publics that were accompanying us during the pandemic. The results for this project was that we actually reached a population of publics much more significant than we had ever imagined, being a university museum in Brasília. And also we learned that the operating mode of social media contributed to improving the perception of our audiences. This helped us understand these publics. And we also could say that the social networks carried out made the museum improve the perception of these audiences, but in such a way that our own university could then use the studies that we did in order to understand how its own conception of cultural extension, of cultural and artistic work for society, how the university was working with society. She could actually, or it could actually understand how it was changing. Unfortunately, this project was over in the beginning of this year, 2021, and we are now seeking to find how to structure another project that could maintain our publics well informed and that could overcome the situation that we now face in the country. So thank you very much. And I hope I can hear more of our colleagues right now.
Thank you, Anna. We're going to jump right into Martin. We've been emailing back and forth, and Martin said good morning and I said good night. So we've been dealing with these time differences, which I think is fantastic that we can all talk to each other from all over the world. So I'd like to introduce Martin Bommas. He is from Macquarie. You're going to have to fix my pronunciation on that. University History Museum from Australia. So it's very late for him right now. And he's going to present on serving humanity, how museums can fight fake news and possibly win. And you know, this is very interesting to me coming from the United States right now. So thank you, Martin.
Well, thank you very much, Nicole, for being such a wonderful person, introducing me and also, you know, helping me so well with setting this up over the past 2 days. So thank you very much for having me. I would like to start with an image that always impressed me. It's taken from a series called Fake Monuments that the Baltimore Sun ran a couple of years ago. And of course, we all know that the building, you know, in the background here is a fake building. But what I would like to draw your attention to is the fact that these construction workers right in front of us use cotton cloths to build, you know, the pavement. I find this attention to fake monuments rather interesting, and this is what I wanted to use as a starter, knowing very well that, of course, the UMAC organizers, when they wanted us to think about fake news, did not have fake monuments in mind. But I think there are a couple of aspects that we can all agree on in this room, namely the you know, universally acknowledged fact that universities and university museums seek truth. University museums have a special position in facilitating dialogue between the public and the academy, and that is not anything new to us. Different from municipal museums, university museums capitalize on the unique intellectual resources that come with the parent university and advocates of public engagement. So university museums have, through the lecturers and active academics, boots on the ground in order to, you know, instantly rectify things, or also run, say, a little bit more risky, you know, exhibitions. And inspiring exhibitions like the ones we heard before from the previous two speakers. Now, as these roads extend to communicating knowledge, as much as identifying also misinformation, which mainly comes as fake news or even conspiracy-driven activism, the question is whether university museums should engage as the roles of arbiters. And you know, I found this you know, want ad from a Swiss football club rather intriguing, that translates into no game without arbiters, no goals, no victories, no cheers, nothing goes with arbiters. So are we living in a free world where everyone can just say whatever he wants? There's hardly a day going by where we're not facing fake news. But this, again, is not really what I would like to discuss today. I would like to start with a case study, as the previous speaker did. And I would like to ask the question, who built the pyramids and when? I think every one of us in the room has probably an answer to that. And, you know, some people think pyramids were built by people from outer space, that were probably built 10,000 years ago. Recently, Elon Musk suggested that the pyramids were built by people from Mars, and he, you know, earned an invitation by the Egyptian government to come to Egypt and actually have a look himself to see what really happened on the ground. But after now being 35 years in the business, and after having thought I've seen it all, there are still some new theories coming up. And one of those theories that came up at the beginning of this year is something I would like to introduce you to. It's been talked about by the Taiwan English news at first, and it introduced the world to a new research project that says that all ancient civilizations are indeed inventions of the West, just modern fakes made to demean China. This triggered a huge discussion all over the world, and there are also various YouTube entries to that. And, you know, most people who deal with pyramids and have funny ideas about ancient civilizations are not really experts. But this new idea, this new theory was brought forward by an expert, a Sorbonne educated professor of one of the leading universities in his country. So you would ask yourself, why is that? Why is such an idea suddenly, all of a sudden, presented to the academic world? So what are the 6 claims made in this theory? So first of all, this gentleman deals with ancient histories of India, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Egypt, and he argues that they were all invented in order to demean China. The pyramids of Giza that we just had a look at, that everyone can visit, of course, are fakes and made of concrete. China is not the oldest civilization on Earth, but also many other ancient civilizations are fictitious. Ancient societies in Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India are, as a matter of fact, 19th century fictions, never existed. The Western world invented these societies after becoming jealous of China's grand history. The West, he asserts, has spent vast amounts of money on building pretend ancient monuments. And this indeed is the difference to the first image that I showed you, you know, the recreation of fake Colosseum in the harbor of Macau, to something that actually is presented as a pretend ancient monument, pretending a new civilization that, as a matter of fact, according to him, never existed. So why does that matter to us? Most fake news, and that's my theory, here tonight are actually not news, but misinformation. Disregarding truth as a symptom, as we all know, of the decline of shared values and factual knowledge. And already in 2016, erosion was discussed widely for the first time, but fabricated information, of course, is as old as human nature. The first history books, just look at Herodotus' histories, is a good example for that. Proof of urban legends and conspiracy theories flattering people's biases exists since ancient times. So these are things that are with us since the beginning of humankind, perhaps. The advent of social media promoted, of course, favorable conditions for the spread of misinformation. And research conducted in 2018 already concluded that false news spread significantly faster, deeper, and more widely than the truth. So if this is something that university museums are concerned with, namely creating truth and you know, not presenting misinformations in museums, then that is something that we have to be concerned with. Just have a look at the image that I show on the right, these 3 swords. Without these 3 ladies leaning towards them, you would find it difficult to really identify the sheer size of those, but sometimes images can be deceiving, and images can also create facts like these 3 ladies in front of those swords, create facts concerning the size of those swords. Of course, we all know that there is a political intent here. But it's also important to note that China is not rising to global power. China is returning, and that's a huge difference. It's not just the new kid on the block, a newcomer. China has a long history to look back at, and therefore the argument is that after 100 years of humiliation and suffering from the hands of foreign powers, there is some need for a new narrative. And as far as decolonization is concerned, of course, this is something that, that is absolutely to be supported. However, history seems to be treated in a rather different way than universities actually are used to deal with history, because in order to do so, it is instrumentalized as a vehicle that serves to underline the idea of a return. So the new narrative rewrites world history, and it develops a new way to orchestrate cultural memory. Cultural memory is created in a way that also includes, and that's the interesting aspect here, that also includes the orchestration of cultural forgetting. So cultural forgetting here is not something that is wanted to be forgotten, certain aspects, but they are brought back in order to create one new narrative that kind of comes with a more balanced way of looking into memory and forgetting at the same time. However, Western civilizations, and this includes Egypt, according to this new theory, are fake. Therefore, China fell victim to false claims of achievement. China was blinded by those scholars who pretended that ancient Egypt actually is ancient. And, we talked about, when the pyramids were made and who built them. I don't think I'm telling you any secret here that I believe that they were not built by people from Mars, but ancient Egyptian pyramids were built by ancient Egyptians. And this opinion is challenged here by this professor. Western civilizations are exposed by Chinese research now for the first time, and it's important to note that this gentleman is a Sorbonne-educated professor. So the West is kind of beaten by its own weapons. This new narrative serves to remind the world of China's greatness, but it also helps clinch into an identity of victimhood. So there are two components in this narrative. And this is very interesting because it's a very sharp thought that this professor came up with, combining two aspects of history. They often are difficult to combine, but here with that theory that is indeed, at least in his view, possible. So just a couple of aspects here to sum up. The so-called China dream describes the rejuvenation of a historical great nation, reclaiming what it sees as its rightful place in the world. So that's a new narrative developing from China. And, this is absolutely, unchallenged. There's nothing wrong with that. Everything China does is with an eye to history, like every nation does it. It believes that while the West is declining, the East is returning. And it's probably fair to say that this indeed is a new way of looking things that is shared by many. The Singaporean political scientist and former ambassador to the United Nations, Kishore Mahbubani, says that the West, which has been at the forefront of history for over 2 centuries and kind of negotiated the existing narratives, must now adapt to a world it no longer dominates. So what I want to make clear here is that what I'm talking about here are not isolated views, but it's something that is shared by many across large parts of the world today, and that's something that we have to face. And those of us who are united in the fight against colonization probably find some strong arguments here in this new narrative. But if we look more into the logic of this new theory, then I have to introduce you to gentlemen, both Frenchmen, one Joseph Monnier and the other one François Connier. And I put them in front of us because they are the gentlemen who first invented reinforced concrete, Monnier namely. And the other gentleman, Connier, in 1853, built the first concrete reinforced house. Why is that important to us? Well, it is because, as we know, this professor actually argues that, all these ancient monuments were built of concrete. And this is only possible since the 1850s. So that leaves us to think that the Western civilizations, if he is correct in what he says, built all the pyramids and the Acropolis and the Porta Nigra and Palmyra and whatever in only 50 years' time. And this is such an achievement that outshines everything else that has been achieved, if it was true. So, you know, it just does not make any sense here. Logically, I don't think it serves the purpose, the intention, namely showing how great other nations are by apparently telling us the truth, while the West indeed was only faking it. However, the crux is indeed that the person I'm talking about here is a scholar. He is not one of you know, lunatic people who come up with ideas about who built the pyramids and make a living on that. He is actually in rather good company with some theories like the one that he took forward. On the left-hand side, we see an image of Sir Matthew Flinders Petrie. He is probably one of the most influential archaeologists who is a pioneer of archaeology, and his methods are still used by archaeologists working all over the world today. He was very much impressed by science, and that led him to what he described as the dynastic racist theory, which is completely outdated, this racist theory. And it took academia a couple of decades before they could convince themselves that this is just completely made up. And Petrie was one of the pioneers, as I said, the forefathers of archaeology. Same with Sir
we're
Crafton,
over time, just so you know.
Yeah, Sir Crafton Elliott Smith's diffusion theory, also not valid anymore, but it took scholars 40 years to make sure that this is not what we want. Is that to be fixed? Well, there might be a strategy ahead of us. University museums may want to agree on good practice, set up guidelines. Universities then perhaps want to sign up to these guidelines. Research can be done online about what's going on, what kind of theories are put forward. A committee can be set up that consists of university-based museum staff as arbiters. And universities can probably, involved universities can inform each other about guidelines not being adhered to. Misinformation is not in the interest of universities or university museums, but misinformation, of course, does offer university museums opportunities to take part, steer and inform public debates about knowledge, education, and following the roads as facilitators and advocates. And I would just like to end with a quote by the gentleman who created the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, who actually encouraged us and said, you can fix it. It won't be easy, but once we have government and activists, academics, and web users in place, we can make sure that platforms serve humanity. And therefore, this battle has a chance to be won. Thank you very much indeed for your patience.
Thank you, Martin. So much to think about with that. So we are going to move to Italy now, and we'll hear from Elena Corradini from the University of Modena and Reggio, Emilia in Italy, and Roberta Giunta, University of Naples, L'Orientale from Italy, and they are going to speak to us about a new online magazine to disseminate the value of University Cultural Heritage Italy. And I'm particularly interested in this one because I've seen the magazine, so I'm excited to hear about it. So
many thanks for our presentation. I try to share my screen. Okay. It's okay?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. Many thanks for your presentation. My paper is about the presentation of this new online magazine to contribute to disseminate the value of university cultural heritage. This quarterly web magazine comes from the network of the university museums. These Italian university museum networks started from two projects approved and financed by the Italian Ministry of University. The first one about computer technologies for scientific cultural heritage, knowledge, networking, and valorization, realized between 2013 and 2015, which involved 64 university museums, 38 collections, and 9 botanical gardens. And second one about educational path for lifelong guidance to the scientific method and culture, realized between 2016 and 2018, which involved 47 university museums, 2 big museums, 39 collections, and 12 botanical gardens. You can see the results of this project in the website that we realized for the project. Sorry, because I don't know, because the PowerPoint, okay. The general vision for the magazine derives from the Faro Convention on the Value of Cultural Heritage for Society. This convention establishes rights and responsibilities for cultural heritage explicitly in the context of the Article 27 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community. The general goal of our magazine are to discuss topics related to the university cultural heritage, to open up the way for reflection on the presentation, conservation, enhancement, protection of cultural heritage, intended as a full set of resources inherited from the past, constantly evolving in spite of their actual owners, considered as expression of the values, beliefs, knowledge, and tradition of civilization. We have an open promotion and a scientific committee constituted by 25 universities, 1 research center, 1 civic museum, and by 46 museums director or delegates. And this is very relevant for us. Our stakeholders are not only university museum professionals, because the magazine is open to contribution from various professionals, operating not only in all kinds of museums, but in any field related to knowledge, conservation, safeguard, promotion of cultural heritage. And the magazine is a virtual platform to stimulate creativity by spreading knowledge about innovative and sustainable methods and technology applied to the management and communication of cultural heritage, and also to stimulate an interdisciplinary approach to themes to the good practices of sustainability, accessibility, and participation, to digital humanities, to new digital culture, to use of storytelling, and to gamification. An open space to spread up-to-date research, insight, experiments on heritage as a tool of knowledge and integration for cultural memories of communities, and also ideas, proposals, topics about the cultural heritage and these values. This shared work is born during the pandemic to help museums and museum professionals maintain and increase awareness of the relevance of their heritage, their activities, and their social function. And the magazine intends to continue highlighting a wide range of professionals dealing with a lot of disciplines or aspects of cultural heritage, with a specific attention to university museums. In the first year, we have published 4 issues, and the 5th is in progress for the 1st of October. Oh, sorry. The magazine has a variety of topics, till now 20 topics. The most relevant, as you can see, are university museum, and then the second, museum education, and the third, the digital technologies. There are some articles about Italian University Museum and Collection Organization, like Museum Center, like in University of Naples, Federico II, or the museum system in the University of Catania. And also there are about European University Museum and Collections, and also article about functional architecture for university museums, like anatomical theater for anatomy, or observatories for meteorology. And like I said before, a lot of articles about digitalization, about the role, for example, of digitalization in European Digital Library, or the challenges facing Italian University Museum about digitalization. And also some databases in some university museums, or this history of medicine topographical databases, or also some videos. And about education, like I said before, the educational activity that the museum have realized during the pandemic, and article for architecture and archaeology, for example, this article about the Museum of Archaeology for Rome in the University of Tor Vergata in Rome, or about anthropology, like this article about the concept of patrimony by our colleague from Argentina, or about a relevant theme also for our museum, that is the cultural tourism, or about a very current theme, the biodiversity, or landscape and gardens, but also about library and archives, the very relevant issue that comes from the document from the archives to realize a lot of stories. And at the last, a special issue that we are realizing in our magazine, that is the publication of the conference papers from the conference of the CIDOC, the ICOM International Committee for Documentation, held in Geneva last year. Now we have published the first 10 articles, and we are publishing the last article in October and in December. There are a lot of articles, as you can know, about the relevant theme that is the documentation, for example, in Portugal and in Brazil, or in Singapore National Collection, or in Estonia, also in Mexico, for example, or in India, or in Tokyo National Museums, and also a database for performing arts, for example, in Switzerland. And to conclude, this is a call for paper for all of you, for your participation for the next issue, if you want, or when you want. The next issue, the number 6, is for January 2022. The deadline for the delivery of article is 30 November 2021. You can find all the information in the website of the magazine, or you can write to us or to me when you want. Many thanks.
Thank you. I'm clearly impressed with the international reach of all the articles that the magazine does. So next we will move to Poland, and we'll hear from Monica. And I don't even want to attempt your last name, Monica.
It's simple, it's Dunajko.
There we go, perfect. And she's from the Museum of the University of Warsaw in Poland. And we're going to hear about research during the pandemic, plaster casts from the collection of the University of Warsaw in Poland.
Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yeah, looks beautiful, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to tell you about a part of my PhD project, plaster casts from the collection of the University of Warsaw, and about my research during the pandemic. Okay, so the Warsaw collection of plaster casts was created by the last king of Poland, Stanisław August, and a few years after his death, the collection has been donated to the University of Warsaw where it served the generations of students of art, architecture, archaeology, history as a main didactical tool. And 4 years, curators of the University Gallery of Plaster Cast continued the royal tradition of importing plasters made in the best European ateliers. So the collection grown to over 700 objects. However, the Second War resulted in the complete scattering of the gallery and its archives. At the beginning of the war, the university campus has been occupied by the German soldiers, and they destroyed a lot of objects from university's collection, plaster cast included. At the beginning of the 1940s, the survived copies were transported as university deposit to the National Museum in Warsaw, where they stayed until the war was over. In 1946, the collection was distributed to various institutions, and unfortunately, the cast have never returned to the university. So currently, it is very difficult to recreate the collection and to recreate the contacts of curators with the workshops. Therefore, having no access to the most of the archives because of the pandemic, but having more time, I decided to focus on what was left and on what I overlooked before, so on some plaster cast and the markings. But is it possible to do research during the pandemic, during the lockdown in my own home from my own living room? I believe it is. So I started my research from the sculptures purchased in Paris in 1820 and 1830, and comparison of data from survived documents with several plaster copies allows to conclude that the characteristic round-shaped stamp was used by François-Henri Jacquet, sorry for my French, one of the most famous and respected French plaster makers in the first half of the 19th century. In the middle of the stamp, there is a sign Musée Royal, which confirms the institution where the copies were made. And the sign also indicates the time of its creation. The name Musée Royal was used during the reign of Louis XVIII. And such dating is also confirmed by iconography of 3 lilies, which refer to the coat of arms of the Bourbon dynasty. Interestingly, stamp did not appear on all of Jacquet's plasters made in this period, and at the current state of knowledge, it is very difficult to determine why some of them do not have the markings. This might be associated with the fact that Jacquet made copies of both pieces belonging to the museum's collection, as well as sculptures from his own personal collection. He also used museum's forms to make copies which contributed to his sizable profits, but this eventually leads to his dismissal from the position. It may be also that only selected copies were marked this way because the obligation to use the stamps was introduced at the second half of the 19th century. The Warsaw collection was expanded by other plaster casts made in the Louvre in 1879, and this time the objects were signed with an oval-shaped stamp, with just the inscription. The stamp was used by the workshop at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, but unfortunately the documents do not allow to conclude which artist signed this way. Gathering the information about the Louvre workshop wouldn't be possible without help of the Louvre Museum staff, who during the pandemic provided me all necessary information, sent me inventory cards, scan of the books, scan of the articles, pictures. They never left my many emails without a response, and it was a nice surprise to discover that even in the worst period of lockdown, they wouldn't leave anyone without help. In 1863, to Warsaw were brought copies made in a private Parisian studio run by Alexandre de Sacy. Each surviving copy is marked with an oval-shaped stamp, and At the first glance, the iconography placed in the center, a coat of arms used by the British government, is both surprising and confusing. Why a French artist used British symbols? I found out that in 1856, Desailly patented in England a type of fibrous plaster, and this might be the reason why he decided to choose this iconography. In all likelihood, Desailly had also studios in various cities, as reflected by the names of the cities surrounding the iconographic symbols. The atelier was a private studio working regardless the state. So this time the Louvre Museum staff couldn't help me a lot, and the French National Archives were still closed, and I could base my knowledge only on the 19th century books available in the digital libraries. In the same period, university collection was also augmented with casts signed by the Italian caster, Leopoldo Malpieri. The Malpieri family was part of a well-known group of Italian formatori. These artist casts were signed with a rectangular stamp with a floral motif in its lower corners. In the center of the mark is a sign Leopoldo Malpieri Formatore Roma, which, in contrast to the markings from Louvre, but as same as the Desailly stamps, provides information not only about the place and approximate time of creation, but also the name of the caster. In this case, I was supported by other researchers, like Raffaella Bucolo from the Sapienza University in Rome and Peter Malone. They share with me not only articles and documents, but also their knowledge based on the years of their work. The next stamps belong to the atelier of brothers Claudio and Aurelio Micheli in Berlin, which next to the state-run Gipsformerei was considered the most important German institution dealing with cast. The Micheli brothers series catalog included casts of reliefs and sculptures from various eras, not only from the antique. And copies made at this workshop were designed with a stamp containing the sign with their names, with the seal pressed into the still wet plaster. When it comes to German, professors from Warsaw did not limit themselves only to the atelier of the Micheli brothers. I found several plaster marked with a sign characteristic of the first few years of existence of the famous Gipsformerei. The plate is made from brass foil and bears the crest of the Kingdom of Prussia. This stamp was used between 1890 and 1918. And just like the Parisian marks, the signature of the Berlin studio also underwent changes. The iconography reflected the country's political situation. The eagle in the center changed from the eagle of the Kingdom of Prussia to the one used by the Nazis. And since 1962, plasters have been marked using the official stamp of the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation, designed by the sculptor Karl Roth. When it comes to German ateliers, I based my knowledge on the publications. I was trying to contact the Gipsformerei archives, but they told me that they do not have any documents before 1950s. So unfortunately, I did not find out who exactly made the cast bought by the University of Warsaw. The stamps allow me not only the tracking of contacts made with European workshops, but also the determination of the origins of particular works and the exact time of their creation or the name of the caster. But I learned something more. A year ago, when due to coronavirus, most of the archives, museums, libraries, universities were closed, I was a little bit devastated. I was afraid that I couldn't continue my work without being physically present in the institutions. But then I started sending emails, many emails, and I found out that locked up at home researchers can create an international network of cooperation, exchange of knowledge and experience. They have shown that there is no jealousy or greed for research results. And I discovered that digital databases, libraries, and archives are rich in fantastic books and articles, and they are constantly supplemented with the new one, even during the pandemic. So this year showed me that nothing is impossible when it comes to research. And I hope that the pandemic will finish soon, but this type of cooperation between us will last for longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. That was very interesting. And I know that I got a different type of research done during the pandemic too. So I agree. I hope this allows us to move forward and think in new ways. So thank you. Thank you to everybody. Those were all fantastic. And I have to admit, I am a terrible chair because I let everybody go a little long because they were all really great. So we don't have a ton of time for questions. I have some, but I want to leave it to anybody else who has questions to start first.
Is it okay if I have a question, Nicole? For
Yes,
Martin.
jump in.
Martin, I'm sorry. Can I call you by your first name? I have a question for you, and it was really moving. I was really moved by your presentation. And I was thinking, do you think it would be possible to answer this misinformations, as you call it, with a combination of our work as professors, but also curating shows that can destabilize this kind of misinterpretation? I was thinking of Damien Hirst. So, but this is just an example. We could maybe join forces, as Florian said in the beginning with his during his talk, and maybe have shows that also help us to criticize this kind of misinformation, as you say it. So I was wondering, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, Anna, this is a fantastic suggestion. And actually, I was hoping that someone would come up with this idea. I'm glad it was you. Because, it has really a huge impact on everything that we're dealing with. Because if the pyramids, say, as example, are fake, then everything that there is in the British Museum is fake as well. It's everywhere is fake. We're all surrounded by fakes. And also, in our museums, we cannot have the form Romanum or, let's say, original statues or so. We can still deal with objects. And this is, the smallest object will tell the same story as the largest monuments. So I think what you suggest is exactly hitting the right nail. I think absolutely we should collaborate on that, because a single voice is not enough to be raised here. It's something that concerns all of us. And I think in that case, it's not really fake news, because fake news, that is something that a non-expert could, come up with. Every opinion is good enough. But here we deal with people who actually know. And therefore, it has to be fought by other people, like you suggested, who know as well, like university professors, like curators at university museums. I think we're the best place to really tackle that problem.
Any other comments or questions? Well, I think the connections between those, like using Instagram and social media as a platform that's not regulated in that way, is an interesting connection in that we've been having those same conversations here. Any other questions or comments? Well, I have a question for Florian. I'm wondering, you said that your digital efforts were really text heavy, and you have to deal with translation between Chinese and English, it looked like. I'm wondering if you feel like the digital initiatives made it easier, or was it a barrier with the language when it came to the introduction to the visits?
Actually, for us, it doesn't matter. I mean, this was maybe the one point where physical exhibitions and digital projects are identical. we translate everything and proofread and edit in-house. We also, in the physical space, offer guided visits in 3 languages, actually. So I think that didn't, we know it cost a little bit more time. And when we have a lot of text, we sometimes reach out to other translators to help us stay on schedule, but that is a given for us. So no big problem.
Any other comments or questions? Is everybody just soaking all this into their brain? I know it's the end of the day. Martin, please.
Can I just make a comment for Monica? I think she really deserves a lot of praise for what she's doing, because it's not only the Germans and the Russians who destroyed those Plaster cast collections. Also in the 70s and the 80s, when museums needed more space, the Plaster casts were the first collections to go. And there are not many copies, for instance, in the world of the Parthenon frieze, you know, the Elgin marbles in London. And I think it's absolutely crucial to push forward with this type of research, you know, going into the workshops and reading all those labels, doing copies, you know, of those little signs that are very often overlooked by visitors. So I just wanted to give her some praise for this wonderful work. And of course, it's very encouraging to see that colleagues are really helpful during COVID. I had the same impression when I reached out to people, and sometimes I thought they have more time to respond than they usually have. So this is good, and we all benefited from that. So thumbs up, Monica, that was really good. And I like this approach a lot.
Thank you very much.
I think one thing we've all learned is how flexible we can all be working in museums. I'm incredibly impressed with everything. You know, we've all been able to pivot quite quickly and make it work for us, especially jumping into the digital age, which a lot of us, are not there yet. I know I still struggle with Zoom, even though we've been doing this for well over a year now. Any last comments? Because I know there's a workshop right after this. I want to give them some time too to prep for that. Yeah.
Hi, Nicole. Very talkative here, but I would like to propose if we could create a community among us in order to keep on talking through emails, because Florian proposed in the beginning, and which was incredible, that we should think about projects that would connect us digitally. And that is something really, really important for the reality where I live in, because the digital sphere has put us in such a possibility that we never thought could be possible. We don't have the structure most European realities do. So if we could maintain this community that we just formed here and actually propose to work together to UMAC, I thought that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I mean, I'm in, as you can imagine. I should maybe say that I've been emailing a little bit with Silke and Steph and other colleagues, but if all of us come together, and the number now of participants is a bit lower than it was earlier on, but that would be fantastic. And I'm happy to propose first exhibition ideas or digital initiatives. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yes, let's continue these conversations. Is it Ree, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just had a quick point about time during the pandemic. And I think it's worth noting that not everybody's experience of the pandemic was the same. And we're having conversations in the UK about how people, particularly women who often took the brunt of homeschooling, have not had enough time to do research and things like that, and how that impacts on their long-term career. So it's just worth taking that with a pinch of salt. That's not saying people who didn't have homeschooling had an amazing pandemic, but it's just worth, when we're thinking about time and opportunities, to also take into consideration that a lot of people were really burnt out. There's a lot of mental health crisis kind of coming down the line, and that we have to take consideration of that as well as going, woohoo, look at the cool stuff we did and how we battled through. I think we have to kind of take care of ourselves as well. And, you know, and for some people, you know, we've got somebody coming in from Sydney today. This is still ongoing. This is, you know, we're not out of it.
That's a fantastic point. Thank you for making that, because I know I am tired. Marta, you have your hand raised.
Now, it's just to add to the collaboration post-conference. We're examining some possibilities of continuing some of these conversations. Meredith is doing some kind of benchmarking of what's the best tool so that it's universal, can be used in China, for example, without a VPN and so on. So something like Discord or something, you know, working groups 2.0, but that we can continue this several parallel discussions at the same time. So the exhibitions is one, third mission is another, you know, there's so many issues that have come up in our conference. So that's just this note. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. I completely agree. Continuing conversations is so important. Dominic, you have your hand raised.
Yes, good afternoon. There's something that I want to point out just is that I think we all have struggled under the COVID situation, but we also blossomed. In my case, 5 years ago or 6 years ago almost, I had to pack my entire collection in function of building works at our building, and it would they said it would take about 1 or 2 years, and it's ongoing 6th year now. So I had to adapt because our collection is actually used for the lessons and practicals for the university students, and so I had to go from the museum to a little room and with a little bit of the collection to give practicals to the students. And then COVID came in. And then I had to adapt to give practicals to the students with just a bit of my collection through means of online teaching. And we even gave microscopic slides practicals through online sessions. So I think we can pat ourselves on the back, as have been said all these 2 days now, that we as university museums working with collections, working towards university and university students, that what I heard the last 2 days, that we adapted very well, and that we have come up with a lot of solutions, good solutions, and I would applaud working together to exchange the experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, adaptability is one of our strong points when we work in museums. I just want to thank everybody for this. And it's true, we don't work in a vacuum. If we've learned anything, is that we can all communicate with all around the world at the same time, even though some of us are tired and some of us are just waking up. So just thank you to everybody. Those were fantastic presentations, and I'm so honored to be part of this community. Thank you all. Oh, do we